Well, welcome. I'm Sean LaRosa. I'm the Assistant Superintendent of Early Learning at Livingston ESA and co-chair of the Early Literacy Task Force.
Hi, everyone. Glad you're hanging in after lunch. We promise we will get you moving as the afternoon goes on. I'm Susan Townsend. I'm the Literacy Project Director for MAISA and the chair of the Early Literacy Task Force with GELN. Sean and I have been doing this work for, well, we're going on my 6th year at MAISA, but my 8th year involved in the literacy practice work and the organizational practice work as well. So we're kind of a yin and a yang tag team. Prior to that, I have to acknowledge Naomi Norman from Washtenaw ISD because she was one of the original co-chairs, and also Dr. Kyle Mayer from Ottawa ISD, as he was a co-chair with us as well. So we're looking forward to handing the torch over this June to Michelle Goley and Shelley Gohl. They will become the task force co-chairs for literacy with our support behind the scenes. But change is good, and we're looking forward to stepping back a little bit in the organizational part of the literacy initiative. We have some outcomes for the session today that we're hoping you leave with, and that is really to help you as leaders develop the understanding of the literacy coach's role and the importance of the coach-administrator partnership. Now, you'll notice we said literacy. We know math does not have coaching yet, but with the design that they're building out, there will be math specialist support, and we want to make sure those connections are made throughout this conversation. And we're also really trying to develop a deeper awareness around the organizational practices. This is just another way to look at this work. The coach-administrator relationship is critical in supporting teacher growth and student success. And if you recall from this morning, teacher growth is as much as important as student success. School leaders can make or break a school's culture of coaching. And you also heard the layers today, that those layers, it goes above just being a teacher, it goes above being a principal, it extends up to the district superintendent as well as the ISD superintendent. We're all in this together, and you need the support all the way across, top to bottom, bottom to top, in order to make this work. Leadership and coaches, the intentionality, the collaboration, and the focus really provide maximum opportunities for coaches and educators.
We want to get a feel for who's in the room. So can you just give us a hands up if you're a coach, literacy or math? How about a building principal? Could be a center director as well, like building level leader. 1. How about teacher leaders? Oh, that's sad. Sorry, I know. How about ISD consultants? Just out of curiosity, ISD literacy consultant, ISD math consultant? Oh, okay, or other. Okay. And how about soups or assistant soups? Who am I forgetting? Like, tell me if you have a role outside of. Awesome. Anyone else have a out of the box role? Okay, we thought it would be important just to kind of get a lay of the land. So one of the things that we want to get across using this kind of idea of gardening is the coach and the leadership relationship, and how if you're maximizing that relationship, you're going to maximize impact on teachers, which maximizes the impact on kids. So we have, the seeds in the middle, and we're going to talk about kind of The Tale of Two Gardeners. So we have gardener A who goes to Burpee and buys exceptional seeds, takes them home, puts those seeds in the ground, and then randomly waters them, randomly weeds them, randomly fertilizes them with no intention. Like, oh, I hope that works out. Like I bought the thing, that should all work out. Or gardener B goes to the same store, buys the same exceptional seeds, goes home, before they plant them, prepares the soil, right? Tills the soil and gets the soil ready for the exceptional seeds. Then fertilizes that, plants the seeds, and then on a regular basis, weeds, waters, fertilizes, tends to the garden. This is what happens when you bring coaching into the environment. You think about the fiscal resource that a local district can spend on coaches. And then sometimes after 5 years, they're like, well, coaching doesn't work. When in fact, you bought the most amazing seeds, but you didn't bring them back to the environment to support that.
Dawn, if I may, earlier we started with your roles. Regardless of where you are, think of what you do and what your contact is with a literacy or math coach and make that connection, because we all know our fingers do dip into that regardless of what our role is.
So at your tables, we just want you to have a short conversation about those two scenarios, and then which garden do you think is going to yield the most beautiful and bountiful crop? And how do those examples apply to the context of your school, your district, your culture, and the relationships that exist between the coach and the leaders, or the coach and the environment? So the seeds and the garden. Okay, so just talk. We'll take like 5 minutes. Okay. What I'd like you to do right now is take out this fancy placematty-like thing. And this morning you may remember that Allison talked about what supports educators' learning, the roles, the events, the routines, and the tools, but it was really the inquiring community and the conditions that surround all those things that allow people to get to deep learning. So at your tables, I'd like you to look at this model that Allison talked about and talk about the connections between that and how, when you're tending to the soil and creating the conditions, why does that allow you to get to deep learning? And how does the coach fit into that? Okay?
And just to add to that, I heard somebody at one of the tables mention, you know, as you're onboarding people into your building, we know teaching staff changes, we know leadership changes, and we know coaches change. And the number one piece as a leader is to develop that relationship with your coach, but coaches need to also do that with teachers and vice versa. So it's really important in that context, as you're cultivating your garden, you're thinking about the context on that chart, what does that mean? Because if you don't do that, you may end up, those seeds will not be sowed.
Okay, so the other thing I want to add to that too, sorry, this is what we do, is we also talked this morning about how this is top down, bottom up, right? So in your context, you might know, you might be able to identify where a breakdown happens. So you onboard a new teacher, as the building principal or the curriculum director or whoever, you should be able to talk about with deep certainty about what your professional learning model is and about what your coaching model is. One of the things that I see a lot is when there's a disconnect in that vertical alignment about what coaches should or should not be doing and what their role is within that context of creating the really great conditions for deep professional learning. See, we're going to go on and on.
And that does not take away from the various coaching models that you have in your areas or that you can determine what your model is. But those are that with whatever the model is, you need to have those components.
So go ahead and talk for a couple minutes about that. Oh, you want a reminder about what you're talking about? You're talking about the context surrounding all of those conditions, those 4 squares that get to the really, really deep learning, how the coach plays into that and how important that alignment of your belief system, your values, that structure, how important all those things are. Yep.
So what are some traps you may have discussed that might have evolved in this conversation? And or what are some opportunities? Does anyone want to share out? I'll take 2 people.
I can share out. So I'm loud, but I'll take it. One of the things that we discussed was the roles and how, as a building leader, it's my job to be incredibly explicit and direct with my staff on the role of the coach, because it's a very scary and anxiety-provoking thing, and you have to be incredibly vulnerable as a teacher to invite someone else into your classroom. It really takes courage, and being very, very honest with teachers that the coaches are not there as baby administrators. It's not this, I got you. Someone is not coming in to gather feedback for your evaluation or to provide me information that is about your instructional practice. So it really, really is part of being explicit and defining those roles in terms of what's expected of the coach, what's expected of the classroom teacher, but mostly what's expected of me in saying, I'm not asking a coach to go in and be me in my absence. One of the other things we discussed is being very, very tight on those roles of, on days that there's a lack of sub coverage or it appears that someone is not being utilized, the go-to can't be, we're pulling the coach because she's available. I'm here, right? No, and that's hard, is really being explicit that everybody's work matters. And just because she's not, directly in front of a group of 26 children right now, pulling that is just as, detrimental as not putting a sub there. But roles and responsibilities is something that, for me, it has helped me be incredibly black and white on. And when I was a new principal, I had no clue. I shared that I had to ask a friend, what do the coaches do? Because I don't know. And I didn't want to do it wrong.
Thank you for sharing that. Roles and also that trusted relationship needs to be in place. Someone else? Thank you.
So I'm a district coach, but in Macomb County. So I'm in a fairly large county. And we're very fortunate that we have a lot of support through our ISD. And they have a county coaching network, which there's probably about 150 of us in the coaches network, and we meet monthly. We follow the work of Diane Sweeney in our coaching network at the county level. And we're very versed in, student-centered coaching and all of that. The trap we're in is to then take that back to the district, talk to the curriculum director, get her on board, all the principals on board. So I'm a district coach. I kind of oversee the building coaches. So that's one of my goals, is to really focus on the Sweeney work and bring that back into the building, because the coach at the building isn't necessarily utilized in a student-centered way. they're more just modeling lessons. Like, hey, will you come in and model this lesson? Not really, what is it that your students are struggling with, and how can we work together and collaborate on bringing, positive results?
A nod to the vertical alignment, and it's also a nod to really having an established focus and a direction. And whatever your focus and direction is, of course, I'm going to say this, the net at the bottom are the essential instructional practices, the organizational practices, and the suite of documents. Because anything above that, you can tie and connect to those essentials. And like you said, you've identified your focus. We do have areas in the state that don't have a defined focus, and so it gets confusing. We have some things, though, to help you that you can have at your fingertips. We're not going to go through all of them, but we're going to share some, and then we even have a couple we're going to add. In front of you at your tables, you have the No More Random Acts of Literacy Coaching. It's a quick reference book. It models, of course, we're a little partial because it's from our own Aaron Brown and Dr. Susan Lallier, who helped us develop our coaching essentials. Take one. There's also stickers that we are asking, because it's covered by the grant, that you add a sticker in your cover page. So those are all there, but those are there for you. That's one big resource. Another, of course, is the literacyessentials.org website. We are now very fortunate to have Kyle Gagne to help us make sure things get uploaded in a timelier fashion. And so there's a lot of resources you can take advantage of on that site. We have all our essential coaching practices, which you have in front of you, and we're going to dig into those in a little bit. We have the organizational practices, all the other instructional birth through 12th grade for literacy, and we have the mathessentials.org site as well. And then their suite of resources continues to grow. We, at this point, have the school-wide and center-wide practice modules. There's 4 that address all of the practices. However, they have not been updated to include math. That's a conversation we're having. Do we update, or does math create them around these practices? So that's a conversation that we're having now to determine how to utilize those. The other piece that we have in literacy at this point is a screening tool. We talked about focus areas. This screening tool really helps buildings and districts determine which direction they want to go, because, as you know, educators, we want to do everything all at once. We want to do it all. But we've learned through research that we can't do it all, so let's get a focus. And the screening tool helps you narrow in, as a building or a district, an area or two where you might want to consider moving forward with. It may drive you to say, let's build your leadership team. Then we have digging deeper tools that help you know how to get started if you're going to build your literacy team. It might be we're going to focus on a specific essential around guided reading. Then how do I do that? Sean, I'm going to ask you to step in right now, because you have some examples of schools in Livingston that have utilized those tools very nicely. Our Literacy Leadership Network also uses these tools.
So when the school-wide, center-wide were written, I was launching a deep dive. Well, as they were being written, I had an elementary principals network that we would float things by and get some kind of feedback, like, is this going to work? Like, are we totally off base? So we got feedback from the field, limited feedback. Then we developed the school-wide, center-wide, and then I engaged with my elementary principals in 10 full days of learning around the school-wide, center-wide practices. And Melissa Uziak and Christy Cooperstein, who were the primary authors on that, came and actually studied my network. And so they looked at, what does this look like as far as learning for the leader, And then how does that get implemented back in the garden, right? And so we had every building in our county use the screening tool to, well, first of all, they gave us input because that was also developed by Melissa and Christy with our help, and then feedback from my group and then other cohorts. But like, how do you narrow it down? Because you can't do everything. And what data are you looking at to determine what's important? And once you narrow it down, then the digging deeper tools help you figure out how to do what you've said is important and what you need instead of just making things up. They are robust, to say the least. And I think one of the things, the feedback that we got from our principals was like, oh my God, how many meetings do I have to get through this? And we're like, well, this is like a multi-year thing. You won't finish it like in 2 meetings. This is going to be maybe a 4-year thing. And one of the other big takeaways is we always give this advice, it's even written in the screening tool, don't necessarily go to the hardest thing. You have to find a balance of what are you going to have great reward on? And you can only have great reward if you can get people roped in if they think it's a doable goal.
So you might be thinking, okay, that's one area. Through the Literacy Leadership Network, that right now it says Literacy Leadership Network, we are going to build it out to be more inclusive so we have an opportunity for math. We're going to pilot that next year. With Sean's experience, Dr. Christy Cooper-Stein then extended it in the last year. She actually worked with other areas to work on, well, what does this mean when we really put these into even deeper action? And she is now publishing her report and has found positive experiences from the buildings, which I think just, again, puts icing on the cake that we're so lucky in Michigan to have the support of our researchers. It's unbelievable. And this is a tool that you will have access to. I don't have all the digging deeper tools on the website yet, but it will be on the website. I'm working with Kyle to make sure that's available. So it's free, easy access, and it's step by step. And then if you have questions, you can always call us to help guide you. We also have, always refer to the MDE coaching model. It's built around the coaching essentials. And that's, I think, important to make that connection on. This is statewide work. It's a statewide initiative. It's supported by MDE. And so it's really important to make that connection. And again, it's a really good visual demonstrating what coaches should be doing and how they should be supporting. Then we have a couple, we shared the No More Random Acts of Coaching. I have a new sheet that I forgot to put in, it was my bad, of several articles that talk more about the coaching leadership relationship, which will be added into the PowerPoint, which you will all have access to every PowerPoint from this event. And then I'm going to let Sean talk about the next one.
So I'm going to talk about the Sweeney work. So in my context, again, I run the elementary principals and I run the instructional coaches meetings. So we're doing we don't meet together, but we're doing similar and connected book study. This is about that intentionality and why it's so important. So the principals are studying leading student-centered coaching, and the coaches are studying student-centered coaching, right? So then what happens is they get home play, we call it, not homework, after every network meeting, and guess what the home play is? To talk to each other, to come together about what they've learned and how that impacts what they're doing and perhaps like what's working, what might they need to change about what they're doing. So I would highly recommend those 2 texts, and some of the activities we're going to do later come as a sort of a kicked off from there. Is this me? Okay, so this kind of goes back to what you were saying. This is why I said you're a plant. And this is like bottom to top. Everyone should have a really clear understanding of this. And here's Here's the deal. No one does. I can guarantee in your organizations you have misperceptions about this role, right? So coaching is not. If you haven't done this activity with every level of your organization and you have coaches in your world, my advice is start here. This is a great springboard about misperceptions, and it really goes to leads into what the heck you're going to do with these people. So Coaching Essential, or the Coaching Essential 4 is really all about how to maximize this effectiveness. It's all about tending to the soil, right? So it's most effective when it's done in a multi-year, school-wide or district-wide initiative focused on student learning, not on teacher evaluation, on student learning. And there's a couple key words in here: multi-year and school-wide or district-wide. So not a one-off. That this elementary, they have all the rock stars, so they're doing all the things. But this elementary over here, not so much, right? That's an inequity. And I can guarantee in your context, you could tell me where those spaces are in your world, right?
I think it's important to also make the connection around the word focus. We talked a little bit about having a committed focus. Sometimes within a district, a building may have a different focus based on what their data tells them. All of this centers around what does your data say. But if I'm building A and Sean is building B, we're in the same district. We're utilizing the essential practices and the organizational practices, but my data may say I need to focus on something a little bit different. I may be developing a leadership team because my staff had a huge turnover and my principal left. So I may be starting there where she may be in another area of focus. But again, your district's aware of that and they're still committed to the coaching relationship within their district and the work around literacy and math.
So will you get out your school-wide, center-wide essentials and turn to the values page? And at your tables, I want you to have a really quick conversation about how this coaching essential connects to the value statements in the school-wide, center-wide. So I want you to just do a little conversation about how they're connected, how they support each other. So what connections do you see? Between those values and the school-wide, center-wide, and coaching practice?
Talk about that first value is very evident, right? That it's multi-year, sustained,
Collaborative, systematic, improving teaching and learning. So there's a definite connection with Essential 4 and Value 1. And then we also talked about Value 5 and, and then number 2. We saw a lot of connections there with Value 2.
So the reason we asked you to do this is we want to just bring it home again. It's not one more thing, right? The things are connected, and that's super important. So essential school-wide, center-wide practices. 1, form your leadership team. A lot of places when they do the screening tool, this is where they start. If they don't have a leadership team, like this is the thing. And it's an easy on-ramp. And then it would become more and more clear what you need to do after that. So the leadership team is composed of instructional leaders committed to continuous improvement in literacy and ongoing attention to data. Now, if you are breezing through the coaching essentials, do you think you're going to see some automatic connections there. Again, it's like not one more thing, right? That's an important thing to keep remembering. Then, if you go down into some bullets, the lead administrator, the leadership team includes members with considerable and current expertise in literacy and early childhood education. Yes, and math. Could that be your coach as part of your team? Would you be insane not to include your coach? Yeah, you would. And then distribute leadership throughout the organization for the purpose of building leadership capacity amongst all staff. The power in this is that then your staff is not put upon. Because that's one of the things that I think slows down. That's a trap, right? That's one of the traps where an edict comes down from above, you shall, blah, blah, blah. And if it comes from the leadership team that has a wide variety of people on as members, it's a very different proposition.
It's also important to note that when you talk about leadership team, you may walk into several buildings and you might see a leadership team that is run solely by the principal, even though you have your team. And the leadership and the expertise is not distributed. Part of having that leadership team is so you don't exhaust your staff. You're utilizing expertise that other people may have. I think I'm pretty solid when it comes to literacy for some reason. I still have to learn a lot about literacy because things change continuously. But I'm probably not the building principal that should have acted like I knew it all about math, because I didn't. So I wanted to make sure I had someone who was well versed in math as well, and my coaches, and made up of the representatives I needed. But it definitely is important, if you're going to focus on building your literacy team, even if you already have one, really defining, is it set up and structured the way it should be and the way research says in order to move things forward? Or is it structured just because it helped the principal check a box, or it helped the principal just have some control over what's happening without allowing to think outside that trap?
We're going to assume you have your team formed, right? And then we want to talk a little bit more about the screening tool. So here, you talk, I'll click.
This screening tool, when we developed it with our researchers, it really, there was a lot of conversation. It can be long. Who takes it? Well, we want the whole building to take it. It does take a little bit of time to do. And again, the purpose is helping you to define your focus for your building based on your data. It's meant to be a screening tool. Quick. We don't want to spend too much time on it. And the directions are really in this document, so I don't want to spend too much time with that. But you'll notice that it really quickly has you look at practice 1, practice 2, practice 3, and then determine what level individually your building is at. And then your group, your team, will come back together, and there's actually a way to sort it through the directions. What's important to note here is, again, it's meant to be quick. It helps you move into consensus making, and then it helps you choose your focus areas. You may find out that you have 3 that rank the same. Choose one. And so the directions are there for you to do that. A lot of people wonder, well, there isn't a screening tool yet for math. There's not. And so we're looking at, again, do we revise this one and update it, or do we create one for math specifically too? I don't know that answer. We're going to rely on our researcher team to help guide us through that. Or will we have a whole new set of documents, and these are just available for the literacy arena? We don't know. We'll find out. But for our purposes today, we wanted to share this because the work continues and we do already have these. And they have been practiced and tried out.
And the thing I want to add too, if forming a leadership team is your goal, and or you're working with principals or coaches, and they're trying to get the principal on board to get a leadership team, sometimes the reason why people don't do things is they don't know how, or they don't know what to do once they get it. Right? This is a great place to start because there's built-in protocols. So someone who's never facilitated a group of stakeholders coming from different spaces, this is kind of a safe space to start, like with a good tool that's been researched that can like launch you into something good.
This specific tool, it's linked in your PowerPoint. It is, but it's on the literacyessentials.org site. What's not there that will be there is once you determine your focus for each of those essentials, we have digging deeper tools. So if you're going to focus on your leadership team, we have a set of, we call them deeper dive tools or digging deeper tools that walk you through the process of how to build your leadership team. And we have them for every other essential too. And those were practiced and researched by Christy Cooper-Stein this past summer. And those will be available on our site. They're just not there yet. Is there anywhere you can get your digging deeper tools now, deeper dive tools? Yes. I'll leave a sheet of paper here and everyone in this room, I will get you set up to the folder. And then when they're on there, you'll have them free at your fingertips 2 ways. So we're going to move a little bit deeper into I'm an administrator. I'm a leader. I have coaches I work with. Everyone has questions. We have a facilitator's guide and a video, which will be in your folder, that really is an FAQ that answers questions that we have many administrators ask about coaches. You'll notice there's 7. What are the main purposes for literacy coaching? We have principals and we have people in positions of leadership that never taught, or they don't have literacy expertise or math, which we don't have the math one done yet. This is a great video with a facilitator guide that will answer that question. What does research say about effective literacy coaching? Ties you to the research. What should literacy coaching look like in a school? How should a literacy coach schedule his or her time? Someone mentioned earlier, should they develop a book room and it takes 7 weeks? Probably not, but that's just an example of what could happen. How can administrators support literacy coaching? Number 6, what special considerations need to be made with a new literacy coach? And then 7, how can administrators review and strengthen the school's literacy coaching program? And then a summary. But today we're going to focus on FAQ questions 5 and 6, and we're going to show you a snapshot of this video. What we like about this guide is that you can do it in chunks. You could do one question at a time. If I'm a principal and I need to talk my superintendent into understanding the value of coaching, I might do that first one with him or her and have a discussion around it. We have talking points, we have guides to go with this. We started at 28:31. So you'll hear Dr. Susan Lallier talk through, and the whole video is only like 40 minutes tops. 28:31. Might be a little further.
Setting 1 or 2 goals with specific action steps can strengthen the program. Examining coaching
Oh, I think
related to the focus of the coaching cycle.
23. Well, just back up. You'll be able. Sorry.
Also want to make sure that coach be made
Right there. Right there. Right. Go back. Go back.
often and coaches to meet specific to coach as support.
Right there. Right there. How can administrators support coaching?
Provide some specific ways principals can encourage teachers to participate in coaching and to support coaches in their work. Your communications are key. Communication is especially important at the beginning of a new literacy coaching program and at the beginning of every year when you describe and endorse the focus of the coaching program and the roles of the coach, carefully explaining that the coach is not an evaluator. When teachers see that you value the coaching program and view the coach as a valuable resource, they are more likely to participate in coaching. Research also indicates that teachers are more likely to participate in coaching when encouraged to do so by the principal. Principals can certainly find opportunities during faculty meetings and professional development sessions to encourage teachers to engage with the literacy coach. Let's look at an example of how a principal can also encourage a teacher to work with a coach after observing in that teacher's classroom. A principal might recommend that the teacher ask the coach for support regarding a specific literacy practice. After the teacher and coach meet to develop a goal and plan of action, the teacher sends an email to the principal summarizing the steps that the teacher and coach plan to take. This example represents a model for communication between principals, teachers, and coaches. Notice that in this model, the principal does not directly ask the coach to work with a teacher, nor does the coach discuss specific teachers with the principal. Principals also show their support for literacy coaching through their actions. Principals demonstrate that they value coaching by participating in large group professional learning facilitated by the coach, and by observing the coach model lessons in various classrooms. In addition, principals support coaching by providing the time and resources for coaching activities. Coaches often say that the biggest way principals can support coaching is by providing common planning time for each grade level at least 1 or 2 days a week, as well as to communicate the expectation that these common planning times should be facilitated by the coach for the purpose of strengthening core literacy instruction. These scheduled, ongoing common planning times help teachers strengthen their data analysis, instructional planning, and reflective skills, and they foster a sense of collective responsibility for students' progress. It's important for principals and coaches to meet on a regular basis, every week or every other week. And it's important that the teachers know what happens at these meetings. Information that principals can include in their description of the program at the beginning of each year. During their meetings, principals and coaches often examine student data and teacher surveys to determine what professional learning around literacy would be beneficial to all teachers or to groups of teachers. Coaches also provide a general overview of their coaching work since the last meeting and how they are progressing with their own coaching goals. It is critical to remember that principals and coaches should not discuss concerns about individual teachers. If teachers know or believe that principals and coaches are having conversations about individual teachers, it can erode the trust that coaches have so carefully built with teachers.
So you'll see, again, it goes through each question in the FAQ, but that one we definitely wanted to spend time around because you notice at the end, Dr. Lallier talked about what principals should not do. Guess what our number one concern that comes back from our coaches is principals ask their coaches to support them in evaluating. And we know when we look at this document, what supports educator learning, that trust, that relationship has to be built and the roles need to be defined. So it's very, very important. And when you connect back to the values around, it's not just about student achievement and learning, it's about teacher and educator and leader learning as well. And so it's really important to utilize and think about those FAQs and especially that area in moving forward with coaching support. I will have this, since I'm emailing you anyways, I will also add this link because it's kind of a confusing link. So I'm going to email you that part in the little toolkit as well. So for a minute, we want you to talk at your tables. We want you to take the coaching practices that are at the center of your table and review coaching practice essential 4 and talk about how administrators can support literacy coaching based on what you just heard and also what the coaching practice number 4 tells you. So take a moment with your tables, read that, and then talk it through. Okay, if we can bring our conversations to a close and focus up in front. So we know there probably was conversation at your table about communication and defining roles, because we've talked a lot about that today. And we also are using the term administrator a lot, but we want to remind everyone that that superintendent, anybody in a leadership role in education really should be making these connections when it comes to supporting our educators in their learning and instructional practices. What were some other things beyond communication and roles did you come up with? You could just call them out. What did you guys talk about? We're going to get you moving in a minute, so.
I think a lot of it has been stated. I mean, you've already done a good job of that. So it was just kind of reiterating what you had already said. And so what it looks like now is just planning for the upcoming school year, right? And kind of naming it for the principals, letting them know this is what success would look like for our coaches. So it looks like X, Y, and Z. So we need this in place and this communicated. And maybe even before some of our teachers go off to summer, so they can begin to process and mentally prepare that we're going to try to have even like equitable access to coaching. Like everybody's going to have coaching this year in some capacity. And so we looked at like systems of a wave system in terms of like who are the most neediest teachers at the beginning of the school year. Well, our new teachers, right? Maybe not new to the district, but new to that building potential. Well, maybe new to the district, but new teachers. And then who might be our next group of teachers who could have coaching. So looking at it as a cycle as well. So yeah, just forward thinking on what it will look like.
I love how you wrapped that up and just said really defining and planning next steps for the future and being aware of all the things that we need to include.
I think the thing about what you're saying is really clear and super intentional. One of the this is like a mind hack, because our perception, like the system that we live within and the system that most of our teachers exist in, is that coaching is for people who are not doing well, right? Okay, we are the only industry that has that perception of coaching. Okay, so do you think Michael Jordan didn't have coaching because he was so good he didn't need one? Or Tiger Woods? Or do you think Steve Jobs didn't have an executive coach? we need to reframe it that teachers get to have coaching.
Look at March Madness. If you're a basketball fan, who would have thought some of those teams would have ended up in the Elite Eight and so on?
How many times do you hear we were out coached or they were out
Yes.
because it's the coach that makes the difference.
Yes.
In a lot of
The messaging around coaching can help reframe that, but you can't just say it once and assume people like internalize your message because they have been living in a system that has given them a different message overtly and subtly, right? So it needs to be repeated, and then you need to have teachers who experience success, who then you make sure they get an audience. Not like, oh, I'm bragging, I had great results, but let me tell you about my experience working with Susan, my coach, and how I grew, right? The reframing is key. Yeah, and this is the thing. If we focus on student growth, everyone gets on board.
At our table, we talked about a principal who, at a staff meeting, allowed their building coach to do a coaching conversation with that principal. And it was unplanned as far as how the conversation would go, and just doing like a planning conversation or a reflection conversation and showing the staff. And I think that vulnerability is key too. So if we're looking at how administrators can support coaching, it's being vulnerable and opening up the doors too, not just asking teachers to open their doors, but principals as well.
And I think some of those 7 questions that we saw should be questions that a superintendent should be able to stand in front of the school board and answer, right? Because if they don't have clarity about the resources that the money they're putting behind the coaches, the clarity is never going to happen here if we don't have it here.
And Sean and I didn't want to forget, if you look at Coaching Essential 4, again, think about it with the lens, what would your superintendent need to know and be able to be well-versed around in that arena?
So I'll be the one to say it because I'm the principal in the room, but it's rare to have folks go into administration that taught pre-K too. So you're a unicorn, right? If you have an early childhood endorsement going into administration, or if you've taught kindergarten or you've taught first grade, same, right? So I will be completely honest that behind the scenes, it's tough to admit what you struggle in as a school administrator. So avoidance is sometimes a tactic of doing so, but you absolutely have to encourage administration to go into those first grade classrooms, go into those kindergarten classrooms, go into those pre-kindergarten classrooms, and really educate your administration about the importance of early literacy. Because unless somebody is very, very invested in that, they're not going to see why it's important. So if you have an administrator that's resistant, and I'll be honest, I've worked on a team with resistant administrators, but I happen to be the early childhood administrator of our group. 4 principals that have taught 4th grade, 5th grade, 6th grade, secondary. It's a completely uncharted world. So if you volunteer to be that expert, it actually is a huge sigh of relief for them to say, okay, I don't have to fake this, right? Like somebody's going to help me do this. But I mean, Sean probably knows, we'll go to conferences and sometimes you are the only administrator in the room that's ever taught kindergarten or truly understands what 25 little kids learning to sound out letters is. People don't know.
Sean and I are very unique in the fact that we do have early childhood and we do carry that torch. Hence why when we think of falling into traps, we often in K-12 and even in early childhood fall into traps of, well, I don't know about that, or I'm really comfortable at the high school level or the middle school level. I'm 3rd and 4th grade. You need to know this is a birth through 12th grade piece. Our kids don't stop learning and growing just because they enter kindergarten or because they transition from 4th to 5th grade or whatever your building makeup is. You have to know where they're coming from. What do we need to know? Where did they come? What has been their journey? And it's hard because that's not how we're taught when we become educators. We're taught for the part of the system that we're going to contribute to. And sometimes it's hard to go from top down and bottom up in that thinking, but it's super, super important. And again, I go back to, and I think Dr. Alison Risner Fox said it today, we should never stop learning. And I go back to the book, it's an old book, but that Leading Learner book is huge. I'll add that to the email too, because I've said it twice today.
Okay, so on your table, you have a handout. And what we're going to ask you to do is take a copy of the handout and take a pen. Take the coaching essential and the school-wide, center-wide. Stand up, find a partner, someone new, like not at your table. And then you can stand, sit, whatever. Once everyone lands and you're paired up, then I'll give the directions. Okay? So you need coaching essentials, school-wide essentials, the sheet that I just gave you, and a pencil or a pen, something to write with. Get up, find a new partner, find a new space. You need to stand. If not, there are some open chairs here or... Okay, introduce yourself to your new friend. So here's what we're going to have you do. Yep, got it. So you have a Venn diagram and directions. This is like one part of the activity. So what you're going to do is look at the principal role, the coach role, and then where there's overlap. There's a guiding question on here, and then a space underneath to make some notes. So just read and follow the directions. Pretty simple, right? Then you're going to move on to the next page where and this is adapted from one of the texts that we talk about, leading student-centered coaching. This is a self-reflection for school leaders. This could be a building leader, it could be a district leader, it could be even a leader of a school improvement team. It doesn't matter, a leader. So this is really all about this coach-teacher relationship. Are you solid? And then are you communicating it in a way that people really understand it? So you're going to read through that. You're going to kind of rate yourself. And then you're going to talk with your person about why you landed where you did, what you think you need to do to move to another space. If you yourself are accomplished, which probably many of you are, think about the people that you bump up against that are not. And think about if you were going to do a reflection about them and then you coaching them into becoming accomplished in that area. Okay? So then you're gonna talk about that. And then your last thing you're going to do is on the last page. This is kind of more like an accumulation of the time we've had together. What kind of actions do you think you need to take or that you need to talk with someone else in your world about taking? So who needs to do what by when? Maybe it's, I need to take the coaching essentials to the coaches that I work with. I need to talk with my building leadership team about maybe we should engage in the screening tool, the school-wide, center-wide screening tool. So this is like really where's the rubber meet the road in real life stuff. We're going to take about 15 minutes. So if you want to remain standing, you can, but you're going to kind of think for yourself, then talk. Think for yourself, then talk. Questions about what you're doing? Okay, go.
So there's never enough time, as you know. We've packed a lot into this, but we wanted to wet your whistle. And the other thing I think to make connections is with each other. Like you can call each other, you can email each other now that you've had this opportunity to talk, to see how you are doing. Like, have you made any progress with your coach relationship or your new administrator, or as a leader, what have you done to move this work forward? So it's about the connections too. And then,
So let's just for a minute stop and think about all the things we talked about and the activity that you just did, and think about the core values in the school-wide center-wide. And how do you feel like everything that we did today is really grounded in those core values? When I think about the core values, the first bullet for me is huge. And the coach and the coaching role should be really interwoven in that and in in all of them. But particularly for me, it really stands out, the first bullet and the last bullet. If you're not grounded in those values, it makes it really hard to push on the system, right? And it also makes it really hard to push on the system vertically, because sometimes the ceiling as you go vertical gets really, really thick and hard to move. So if you're not coming from a place of why and grounding in those values, it becomes hard to dismantle that.
and as you're thinking about that in your current role, and someone brought this up to us just a few minutes ago, look around the room. We asked who was in this room to begin with. We have one principal. We have several coaches. We have some other administrators as well, state and federal, you know. How do you get this momentum moving forward? If I'm a coach, is it all on my shoulders? No, it shouldn't be. And if you are in that position with your district or your prospective school, reach out, because we can help you think that through on how to get people on board. We have an example, Traverse City Schools. We had 2 schools in the Literacy Leadership Network. Is anybody involved in the Literacy Leadership Network around this work? 2 of the schools at Traverse City, 2 different focus areas, but they had their district support to participate in this cohort. Next year, the hope is that every school in Traverse City participates in this cohort. So even if you're one person and you might have a couple colleagues that believe in this, we can help you talk through on how to maybe make that move ahead. But we can also, we want you to understand, it's not, you shouldn't just be feeling like this is up to you, because this is big work. And I know we as educators want to get things moving fast. And remember Rusty's story? Slow and steady. And I know sometimes, and I'm that person, it's slow. But it's just keep it in the forefront and then take the support offered you to help maybe get it moving a little bit quicker, even though it will still seem slow. We've been doing this work now for 2015, and that was the actual first meeting. We're now 7 years later, and we still don't have this in every school across the state. And our goal is, we're not making money off of this. It's nonprofit, but it's the right work and it's research informed. So know we're here to help you when you're hitting those milestones or you have some ideas and you're just like, they're just not going yet. We can help you through that. And you can help each other too, because there's wins all over.
I want to chime in about Literacy Leadership Network, though, because no one raised their hands, so you might be wondering, what the heck is that? It's really about, it's grounded in the school-wide, center-wide essentials. It's all about developing that system within your school to support student growth. So it's not one more thing, it's a connected thing.
And that could be one inroad as a coach to get a focus. We might have a big district, but you may have a building leader that says, I hear what you're saying, I think I want to move in that direction.
So what we'd like you to do is like, okay, so what, now what? We want to hear about some of your action steps, like who do you need to talk to? What do you need to talk about and why? So we just want to hear a sampling of what you decided you needed to do or you needed to ask someone else to do. So who wants to share? Don't be afraid.
Hi, I think the first step that I need to do is go back to the ISD and share your wonderful information with the other literacy coaches. And from there, then we can kind of work and create an action plan together of steps of when we are meeting with administration in the springtime. And we've talked about creating a video to present to the district of what the literacy coaches are for them, how we support them, what we're not, kind of like that slide that you presented. So I think a lot of it is we've had discussion about it, and we ourselves are so busy doing so many other things that we're not creating that time to build what our system is and show them what we're trying to do.
And articulate it in a way that there's continuity, right, in the messaging. Who else wants to share? That's a great action. Who else wants to share an action step?
This isn't necessarily an action step, but it's kind of an interesting connection to what are the goals for educator learning, and it's a three-circle Venn diagram. But sometimes even talking to your coaches, we've discovered that what they thought coaching was isn't really coaching. So that's been a fascinating experience this year in terms of like seeing them go through a cycle of like, well, this is what coaching has always been. It was like, oh, well, that's like literacy activities versus now this is what coaching interaction looks like. So yes, we have to talk to our administrators about it, but we also have to talk to our coaches and show up being empathetic as to like, well, now this is what it really looks like and this is what it means. And so, and just kind of like beginning to identify the emotional cycles that they'll go through and like becoming something new too, right? And well, just before that, discovering like, oh, crumbs, that's not what I thought it was. But
That's a really important thing to honor, right? Because it is kind of you have to let go of certain beliefs that you were holding on to. I think one of the messages, clarity is your best friend. And to remember where clarity ends is generally where frustration begins.
And again, you named it's opening up that trap for opportunity, right? Because it's easy to stay in that trap, as we learned and talked a lot about this morning. But what opportunities go beyond that trap? I was challenged today. Someone said to me, well, you have the deeper dive tools. Is math going to be added or update? Is it going to be updated? Well, in my mind it is, but now my trap, because we were used to having them. Now we have math. What opportunity do we have beyond with just even the existing tools that have been created and the resources available? Maybe something else will be developed. We know the purpose of what we have will always be there, but let's not get in a trap that we just have to update and revise. The same thing with any change or opportunity. What is the role moving into versus what we're used to?
So 2 things. Here's our contact info. The slides will be in the folder however you get it. Don't forget, we have to go back to the main room. We really are not interested in taking these books back. So we would invite you to take books, share with someone who would benefit, but make sure that you put the sticker on the inside, if you don't mind. Please and thank you. And we're done. Thank you so much.